what I'm going to bring you right now, as I told you when we started this program, is my mentor, a leader in the community, an incredible human being, Mr. Amanuel. We're going to bring him, we're going to talk to him a little bit later, but in the meantime, let's show you a conversation that I had with him about a couple of days ago. And you will see what I mean when I say this man is a giant in our community, and we're so glad and lucky to have him. And so here is a little bit of what we talked about.
And I think in terms of the COVID response, you know, what I've been saying is, like, you know, what it has forced us to do is actually to step back and say, now that all our inequities and problems are so bare for everybody to see, not that they were not visible in the past, but there is, I think, two things that happened. One is the pandemic. The other thing that happened is George Floyd.
Yeah.
And so we talk about a pandemic of anti-black racism. There has been huge assault of anti-black racism, yeah? And we talked this, you know, with my peers. I don't know if you know, the city of Toronto has a 5-year plan to confront anti-black racism, yeah? That was approved by City Council. And, you know, there's a unit within the city under a manager with the right resources to really rally the troops, coordinate the work around combating and confronting anti-black racism. And there's a body called the Partnership and Accountability Circle that supports this work. And there are 12 citizens appointed by the mayor. And I had the humility to be one of the 12 to provide and contribute. And so when this time of the pandemic and the George Floyd kind of overlapped, we were in a situation of almost double trauma here, yeah. You know? And when it starts in late February, March, we start seeing the data coming out of US cities troubling, a lot of black people impacted more. And now we know the data, you know, that here in Toronto we have more Africans and blacks more impacted. So the question for us is, yes, we've been working hard to mobilize resources from different levels of governments, as you know, to support black organizations to reach out and support their communities. But beyond that, we talk about emergency, we need to talk about recovery, and then we need to talk about post-COVID, yeah? Where do we go? The nearest challenge similar to this, it doesn't even come close, that comes to mind to look at the scope of the challenge for black communities is 2008 and 2009. We had a recession here. During that time, a lot of non-profit organizations lost their funding. The majority that either disappeared or disproportionately were impacted were the African and black. Okay? So now what we have to do is, like, you know, yes, services and programs will have to be designed differently. You know, we talk about virtual services. We don't know when we'll be fully back. We're talking about the second wave, all the stuff, yeah? So these 3 pillars of emergency, recovery, post-COVID are critically important. So what are we recovering back to? We're not recovering back to where we were, which was a state of inequity. We wanted to recover better, yeah? And go back to the concept of systems thinking. And challenging black leaders to really think about, not go for the $15,000, $20,000, $50,000 project. Step back. Let's work together to understand the scope of the challenge. We have launched a Black Recovery and Healing Program, a Black Community Recovery and Healing Program funded by the Ledlow Foundation, to really engage in research and capacity building, healing, arts and culture integration, to work with black community organizations and leaders and others, allies, to really come with an understanding of what do we need to recover to, where are we heading. So I think obviously the pandemic and the assault of anti-black racism have been almost a double whammy for us, yeah? I think the light at the end of the tunnel for me is that governments are listening, you know, the corporate world is listening, the foundation world is listening. So we're working very closely to really bring all these players together to have, the important thing is to have a discussion of consequence, you know, to really move away from short-term solutions. What happened during this pandemic and post George Floyd and Black Lives Matter? A lot of well-meaning players outside the African black communities, they want to come and donate money, throw money, and be supportive. I think we have to step back ourselves and say, what's the nature of our challenge? What's the scope of our problems? What do we need? Are we dealing with a $10 million problem, or are we dealing with a $100 problem? Understanding the difference of the scope of our problems and putting a timeline of 15, 20 years into the future is critically important. It's a matter of leadership. And so I think I'm hopeful, because of the work that has been doing, we have been doing, all of us, and I think I am confident that we'll come out of this with a level of a reality check, experience that will take us hopefully in a different way.
And to be honest, having been through this 2008, I don't even know what I was doing at that time, but having lived through this as a person leading an organization, of course, being able to have contacts like you, knowing for the last 3 years I've really spent time trying to learn and understand the challenges in the community. These hit home for me because I was like, okay, I was looking at the existing problems, most of which you mentioned, because for the last 3 years I've been going back and forth talking to you and other people. So this is not new, what you're saying to me. But seeing it now in the lens of COVID and of course anti-black racism, it felt like I was prepared. I'm sure you are too. But when you look around, there was not that many people who are prepared for something like this. And I feel like one of the things that we want to do with this platform and everything else is to let people know, yes, this is terrible. This is it's a crisis unlike any other, but it's also an opportunity. And I would like maybe to ask you our last question, which is, looking at the opportunity, I know you talk about having us collaborate, having us work together. How can we take a charge of this? And I know you have this system, or the idea of an African hub. So now we're going back to the continental African. How can we go into the future, looking at the recovery and next what comes after, and look at it as an opportunity, as opposed to what took place post 2008, and obviously most of the crises we go through as Africans, we tend to come out of it worse than before. How can we make sure that this is not that case? Is that even possible?
It is, and in fact, it's happening. I'm hopeful. I see a lot of young people, people of African descent, really leading in different spaces at the moment. Earlier I was saying that it's time for us to stop tinkering at the edges, trying to treat the symptoms of our problems. We need to really understand the underlying causes, the root cause of our challenges. If we know that, then we can say, okay, what are the solutions that are needed? The solutions reside in the space of innovation, creativity, humility, collaboration, moving away from I, and being in that space that I was saying. To do that, we need something that brings all these different aspects together. I was teaching in the course, you remember I spoke about the work that Otto Scharmer has done around, theory, the need to suspend the inner voices of cynicism, judgment, and fear. The need to step back and hear from others. Why I was so connected to that? Because it made absolute sense. If I hold the space for the rest of us, I will be the first one to benefit out of it. So I think the idea of having some sort of a hub, an African hub, that brings all these things that I mentioned, the opportunity to innovate, to create, to be humble, to look at ideas, to collaborate, gives me some hope that we can actually do that. So an African hub for me, it's a place of trying to bring funding, collaboration, innovation. I spoke, you heard me speaking about a particular type of leadership, system leadership. Our problems are system focused. We need system leadership. And there's an art, there's a knowledge, there's a practice to that. So for me, the African hub would be the place where it's almost like a laboratory, we bring our problems there and say, bring the artist, bring the phase leader, bring the corporate leader, bring the government, bring all these players and saying, okay, how do we tackle this problem? You know, how do you eat an elephant? You know, that's a thing. Exactly. So I think for me, the African Hub, it's a place where technology, innovation, knowledge, collaboration all come together to tackle our problems. Yeah, and I think given lessons learned of yesteryears, I strongly believe that this should be young-led. It has to be led by young people. And people like myself and others in my generation have to come into that space as adult champions and mentors, and not necessarily leading this. So I strongly believe, as a principle, that young leaders have to lead this. You know, for the reasons that we said earlier on, how you multitask, how you come in and out, and you're open to different ways of doing business. And I think such a solution is needed for now and is needed for the next 15, 20 years. And that's why young leaders have to be there, because you know, our problems being, you know, generational, if some of the good foundations are laid, then I think finding resources, finding funding, getting government at the table is not the challenge. The challenge is shifting the mindset of our leaders. So yeah, I think the idea of the African Hub is one bold idea. There are other bold ideas out there, but I strongly believe that if you use a black ecosystem approach, we stop tinkering at the edges. We are courageous enough to take the bull by the horn and saying, hey, we've tried this many times in the last 20 years, it didn't work. It's time to shift the gear. It's not even driving in the same highway and changing lanes. This is literally driving in a different highway. It's not changing a chapter in a book, it's in a different book.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amanuel Melos, for that privilege. We had this interview done last Saturday, and we have an entire interview that we're going to be putting on our website. So if you really want to listen to the entire conversation that we had, which is almost a whole hour, find it. It's going to be on our website at rchc/resources. And this is some of the things that we want to bring to you, the resources, listening to individuals like Amanuel Melos, who is, I mean, for me, I just sit there, even if you hear me talk and asking him questions, I just want to sit and take it in, take all those information, that knowledge that you don't really get so much from our community.